Can we call the Planning Commission to order? Okay. Commissioner, let's see, Commissioner Flores, can you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Ms. Amber, can we have the roll call, please?
Chair Armstead,
Here.
Vice Chair Quill,
Here.
Commissioner Lopez.
Here.
Commissioner Garcia.
Here.
Commissioner Flores.
Here.
Commissioner Sherrick. Here. Thank you. I'm sorry. Commissioner Lewis and Commissioner Orlando Garcia are excused.
Public comment for item listed or not listed on the agenda. A 3-minute limitation shall apply to each member of the public who wishes to address the Planning Commission on any item on the agenda, excluding public hearings. There is no limit to the number of items that may be discussed within the 3-minute time limit. Ms. Meamber, can you have the administration of oath for our public speakers, please?
Is there anyone wishing to speak on an item? Okay, please stand and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly affirm that the testimony you are about to give before this body will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, please say I do. I do. Thank you. You can be seated.
So, should we go ahead with the public comment? Yeah. So can the speaker please step up to the podium?
And this would be for items not on the agenda? Or do you do them for both? It can be for both.
This is Daniel.
I'm speaking to on the public hearing.
I recommend take his public comment when we get to item 2. Are there any others? Okay.
So do we go to the public hearing? Is the General Plan Amendment 24-01 and Development Code Amendment 24-01.
Okay, Chair, could we go back to the consent calendar first?
Go there first.
Yes,
Okay.
and then we'll go to the public hearing items.
Oh, okay, I'm
Thank
sorry.
you.
Consent calendar. Next item is the consent agenda. Consent items are routine in nature and may be enacted in one motion. All public and non-public hearings will be open at one time. Any item may be discussed separately upon request of a member of the Planning Commission or member of the public. Does staff have any updates to the consent calendar?
No, we don't.
Okay. Is there anyone wishing to speak on the consent calendar?
We have no
one
items
speaker.
on the consent calendar. The consent calendar will be the minutes only for this meeting.
So that'll be it? Oh, okay. So, make a motion to approve the minutes from,
Yes, Chair, you would introduce the approval of minutes and request a motion.
okay, so we're looking to approve the minutes of the special meeting of January 18th, 2024. Is anybody wishing to motion?
I'll make a motion, we approve those minutes.
I make a second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
We do need a roll call vote, Chair.
Oh, it'll
Armstead.
be a roll call?
Yeah,
Okay.
you can ask Jennifer to call the roll.
Oh, roll call, okay.
Okay. Chair Armstead,
Yes.
Vice Chair Quill,
Yes.
Commissioner Lopez,
Yes.
Commissioner Garcia,
I will abstain. I was absent last week.
Commissioner Flores,
Yes.
Commissioner Sherrick.
Yes.
Thank you. Vote is 5 yes and then 1 abstain. It passes.
Okay. Public hearing items?
Correct.
The Planning Commission will first hear a report from staff, and then the public hearing will be opened. The applicant will have an opportunity to speak. Next, members of the public will be allowed to speak. Anyone in the audience wishing to speak must be sworn in and fill out a request to speak form. The forms are located at the table near the door. When your name is called, come forward and speak your name into the microphone. Say and spell your name for the taped record. After all have spoken, the applicant will be allowed to respond. The public hearing will then be closed, and the Planning Commission will begin deliberations and make a decision. All decisions except general plan amendments and the municipal code amendments are final actions unless an appeal is filed, and fees are paid within 15 days to the Community and Economic Development Department. If you challenge the resulting action of the Planning Commission in court, you may be limited to raising only those issues you or someone else raised at the public hearing described in this agenda, or in written correspondence delivered to the Community and Economic Development Department at or before the public hearing. We're introducing public hearing items, and we have item number 2. The General Plan Amendment 24-01 and Development Code Amendment 24-01.
Okay, good evening, Honorable Chair and distinguished members of the Planning Commission. I'm very pleased to bring forward to you our City of San Bernardino housing element for 2021 through 2029 through General Plan Amendment 24-01 and Development Code Amendment 24-01. And for this item this evening, as you know, this is a continuation from your last meeting. Since that time, staff has been working closely with the Department of Housing and Community Development, making final edits to the document, as well as meeting with the litigants that challenged our housing element. I'm pleased to say that we've made significant progress. I believe we've moved forward preparing a good document that will help bring the city forward in the coming years. We're awaiting final approval from the Department of Housing and Community Development, also known as HCD. They're reviewing the final draft that you have, similar to, or basically the one that you have. And thank you for your patience with us as we made final edits. This has been a moving target for us, but we're finally at this last stage pending any final edits that come out of HCD. And we also have associated zone changes for our city-owned surplus land properties to help us increase density and provide opportunities for housing. And I'll turn it over to Travis Martin, our senior planner, to provide some additional information. But I'd also like to take a moment to thank Travis, our PlaceWorks team, and all of our city staff, our housing division, Cassandra Searcy and her team, Sam Marinan, our building official, pretty much. I'm sure there's a lot of other people, but really our entire community development staff has come together to respond and prepare this document. So I wanted to give a shout out to them. So Travis.
All right, thank you, Mary, and thank you, Chair and Planning Commissioners. Welcome to our second special meeting for the month for the housing element. As mentioned, we are here hopefully to obtain a recommendation to bring the housing element forward to the City Council for ultimate adoption. I'll just kind of run through, again, a lot of this is information that we've looked at our prior meetings, so I'll just kind of run through everything quickly again for everyone's benefit. We're here for the housing element. It's one of our 7 required elements in the general plan, but of course there are more than that. This has to be updated every 8 years. The goal of the housing element is really to define, policy for the development and improvement and maintenance of housing within the city. It doesn't actually approve any housing development, but it establishes the groundwork, just as our overall general plan and development code do for other development throughout the city. As noted, this is something that we've had to work closely with HCD on. They've reviewed every draft we've had. We've had numerous meetings with them, more honestly than I think I could remember. And they are currently reviewing the final draft, as Mary noted. That was the version that was included in the packet for you for this evening. We have not received final approval on that, but we have received an update from them that what they have looked at so far, they've been receptive to the revisions, and it looks like we will be good moving forward. and ultimately we will have word back from them before we go to council. So just a little bit of background. This has been going on, or we've been working on this project in some form or another since the late 2020. Through, that was when we first initialized the contract for this, through PlaceWorks. Through 2022 specifically, we did all of our public outreach, meetings, ward by ward, public groups, internally in the city through our GPAC, things of that sort. Once we got into the spring and early summer of last year, that was when we finally had a full draft, and we went out for public review on that, did bring it forward to yourselves and to the council through midsummer for authorization, submitting it to HCD for their initial review. And then for the last about 6-7 months, we've gone back and forth 3 separate times with HCD, receiving their comments and revising the document and resubmitting. And that brings us up to the to this month, where we just submitted our last round of edits. Again, a little bit of the outreach, as we've talked about before, ward by ward meetings, kind of visioning workshops in the city, meetings with our GPAC and our DTAC, meetings with staff, other stakeholders in the community. And then, of course, once we had the draft presented or prepared, every time we resubmitted, we did reach back out to those same groups just to receive comments, so that it wasn't a one and done process. We've been engaging, with groups throughout the last couple of years on this. Basic 7 chapters of the housing element, in short, looking at, our needs for housing of various types, constraints against housing development, what kind of resources we have, fair housing programs, and then looking at the other programs that we've had for the development of housing, improvements that we may need to make within our code, within our general plan, other policy decisions, things that would help facilitate the development of additional housing. But as I always do note, the majority of the work and the primary item through the housing element is addressing our RHNA allocation. That's our regional housing needs allocation. This is how many units the city has been, how many it's been determined that the city needs to account for within this planning period running through 2029. For our city, we've been assigned 8,123 units. Again, that's not anything that we have to develop during that period, but we have to make sure that we have the zoning and policy in place to be able to account for that. This is broken up, the 8,100 units, into lower, moderate, and above moderate income units. We've gone through, I know there's a fair bit on this table, but I'll kind of run through briefly. We have our total of 8,100 units, broken up into those 3 categories, approximately 2,500 in the lower, just under 15 in the moderate, and then about between 41 and 4,200 in the above moderate. To look at how we can provide for all that, we went through, projects we have in our pipeline. Those are current entitlements under review, projects that have been approved or under construction but don't yet exist in a final capacity. We also have ADUs, which has been a big resource for us this planning period, both ones that we've permitted in the 2 years since the planning period started, and then based off the trends that we've had over those 2 years, how many we would project through the remainder. And with that, then looking at other vacant residential land that we have in the city that can provide for the types of units in those ranges. With that, we came to a total, it's approximately, I believe it is in the staff report, but approximately 7,800 units, 7,800 to 7,900 that we're able to provide for through current development projects, ADUs, and then existing vacant land. That left us with a shortfall of just over 200 units, about 230, 240, that we needed to address. As Mary noted, and through the other items in front of us this evening, we are proposing then to do some rezoning so that we can provide some increased capacity on some specific lots in the city. That is broken up both between privately owned land and city-owned land. The privately owned land, we have 11 parcels, just under 20 acres in size. They are, if you're interested in the specific properties, they are shown. There's individual maps for each of the properties in the environmental addendum, the EIR addendum that's included in the packet. I did not, because of the number of slides, I didn't include a separate one for each in the presentation here. But we have those privately owned properties. Those are all already zoned for multifamily. What we are proposing to do is upzone them. So we would be creating 2 new multifamily districts. They're kind of sub-districts of some of our existing. That would be our RMH and our RH, the residential medium high and residential high. I apologize, there's a typo on this slide. I see that should just be RH50. That would be taking those existing zoning districts that allow for slightly lower densities, and for these targeted parcels, increasing the density just for those. It would not be changing any land use permissions for them. They would still be multifamily lots. They would still be subject to the same development standards and the same permitted land uses, but they would allow the increased density. That's what's been able to allow us to capture those units. We also have some city-owned land. Most of these are commercially zoned. One of them is multifamily. These are former redevelopment properties primarily, so they're all of our surplus sites. A number of these, most of the commercial, are already sites that we have been working through our housing division with specific development partners for projects that they're looking to do there. So we know that these are likely. We just could not count them because they're not an active submitted application yet. But we are rezoning to support the projects that have been in discussion. So it's something that, as much as we've been able to vet is a realistic outcome on these sites. Yeah, I said those are about 27 and then one multifamily property. That's about 8.5 acres in total size. Went through before kind of some of the specific or significant changes that we've seen in the document, not since the last meeting, but since we first saw it in July. Additional updates to our infill program, adding more sites. We did eliminate the crime-free multi-housing program. That was an action council took late last year. That has been replaced, but I do say that lightly. We created a new program that focuses just on the property maintenance from the recent or the previous crime-free program. All of the other issues, I won't get into all of them, not the time for that. But all of the other concerns with that program have still been eliminated. All that's left is property maintenance for rental properties. There's also the housing mobility program that was added and the place-based initiatives that we added in. And then other significant changes we made, additional analysis on our fair housing. We expanded kind of some of the information that was provided specifically for permit processes, development standards, and fees in looking at our constraints to development. We refined our land inventory, including more up-to-date projects, because obviously there's been more that have come to the table since we started the draft. And then additional information on some of our program evals. With that, then, next steps, as we've said, we've been slowly whittling down this list, I'm happy to say. With our recommendation this evening for adoption, we would then be taking this housing element forward in February. That would be on the 21st at the loan council meeting for February. And then providing that is adopted on that date, we would be submitting the document for final certification to HCD. As I did mention, prior to this date, we have been in discussion with HCD and we are anticipating receiving their formal letter acknowledging that the document has been found in compliance. I said the draft, as I noted, that is in front of you this evening. With that, then we would be satisfied to take it forward to the council. And then our recommendation for this evening, it's in 3 parts. We do have, recommendation is adopting resolution 2024-002. That would be forwarding a formal recommendation that the mayor and city council first adopt the addendum that has been prepared to the final environmental impact report. This is the EIR for the 2005 general plan that we're currently still operating under. And then that would be for both the general plan amendment and the development code amendment. Approving the general plan amendment, that would be acting upon the housing element and establishing those 2 new sub-zoning districts, and then approving development code amendment 2401, that would be to establish the standards for those within the development code itself. And with that, I will I'll step back, open it up if anyone has any questions. As noted, I'm here, Mary's here, and we do have our consultant team. Thank you. Oh, just leave that up.
Oh, thank you. We will now open up the public hearing. Do we have any public comments? I do have one submittal. Daniel Javanti, please step to the podium.
Hello, good evening, folks. Today I came to give some notes. I know it's the 11th hour, 59th minute, but I thought I'd come and express some notes, and I have some minor action items for y'all. So starting off with my first note in regards to general plan efforts, I would like to see and look into rezoning areas that were previously rezoned from residential to industrial or light industrial years ago, kind of on the south side of town, and maybe look to rezone it again to mixed use. So that way, if there are warehouses and things like that, that can stay in place. But if there are neighborhoods and houses, that can stay there as well. It's inclusive of everything that's in the area. The second note that I have is looking into doing a future study, maybe some months down the line when the dust has settled, to assess street sizes and widths across the city with an intent to improve, first, public safety and traffic issues. The second, to improve walking, running, mobility, cycling. And then my third recommendation for you all is to look into doing and recommending to the city council how we can do public beautification, how we can plant trees in the downtown, how we can plant trees near 40th Street, Highland, Mount Vernon, all the major arterials, and get the community involved, get the community organizations involved, and really take pride in our city. The fourth item would be to look into our agreement with Hillwood. This was negotiated many years ago, and it was negotiated mainly in their favor. But as city stewards, we need to do our best to fight for the city and make sure that we have the best deal that's also in our interest. Did you know that Hillwood in Texas develops residential? They redevelop downtowns like something in Fort Worth. This is available on their website. So can we fight and say, hey, Hillwood, you've developed many large warehouses. You're earning tens and tens of millions of dollars a year. Can we do something else? If we don't have those conversations, they won't happen. Kind of like Mr. Larry said the past meeting, with the design on the water tower. If you hadn't said that, nothing would have happened, or a change wouldn't have happened. So if we don't have those conversations, they don't happen. So basically, in summation, my hope is that we do have to pass a general plan, so let's do it. But if there are things that we did not get to, let's get to them. Let's have in future meetings, have these conversations, ask city staff to bring these things back onto the agenda, talk to the city council members so that we're always fighting for the things that we want and we're advocating for the things that we want to see. The general plan, it's not just some document that we say, okay, we approved it, we're not going to look into it for another 10 years. We had to continuously look into these things. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh. Okay, we have another speaker, Andrea Badana. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Andrea Vidaura. I'm with the People's Collective for Environmental Justice. Been up here a couple of times. We were talking about the truck stop, and we're also talking about a warehouse that was right next to a residential area. I think one of the main takeaways from those conversations was we need to work on the general plan. How can we, these are problems that are in the general plan. We have outdated zoning. How can we fix those? And so I'm happy to see that this item is up, and I hope that the energy continues to move so that we can continue to move on all the elements of the general plan, especially the land use one, so that we can ensure that we're really updating the zoning code so that we can make sure that residents are not living in over polluted areas in the community. So I just wanted to double down on some of the stuff that Daniel was saying. All of those recommendations I think are really important. I think there's a big opportunity for multi-use zoning throughout the city, especially in the areas where we're talking about how do we buffer out some of the industrial development to residential development. It's going to be really hard to just rezone entire industrial corridors to residential and imagine like that's going to solve the issue, right? I think multi-use is a tool that can be used to buffer it out, especially having commercial and retail in between industrial and housing areas, residential areas. So I would that's one of the big recommendations that we think needs to be seen throughout the housing element. The other piece is that I think we do need guidelines for where these new residential areas are going to be put, especially if we're going to be continuing to industrialize certain parts of the San Bernardino and making residential in the other parts. What are the guidelines for development? So we're not recreating what we've been talking about in the past here, which is communities living right next to industrial zones. A couple more things. I think planning ahead right now with this housing element is important. I mean, I think there's a lot of grants out there right now for climate change and walkability that the city can be applying for. There's actually going to be a EPA roadshow at Cal State San Bernardino on February 16th. I think it's really important for the city of San Bernardino staff to be there and any of you all to be there too. It's going to be talking about how we can apply to some of the federal money that's been coming down, and it's for projects like these, right? How can we make more walkable, climate-friendly cities? It also supports some of the multi-use housing that we have here. So I want to put that on your radar, but I'll send an email too. I think it's important. It's all about the city partnering with community orgs, partnering with industry and developers to bring that money down. Lastly, I mean, I do want to double down on the Hillwood piece. We sold off that area to Hillwood, which was a private developer, and they were supposed to be bringing back to the community. I know that a lot of the money that they make and profits are really leaving the community. I think all they leave here are maybe some of the jobs, which there are, currently labor fights happening at those warehouses, right? Asking for higher wages and whatnot. So I think we really have to reconsider the kind of master plan deals we're making with some of these developers in the area. And also, like I said, going back to how can we rezone certain areas to make sure. That's it. That was fast. Okay. Thank you.
Do we have any more public comments? No? And we will now close the public hearing. We're going to bring it back to the Planning Commission for discussion and a motion. So, commissioners, any comments?
I have one comment and, a question relating to what a couple of our speakers mentioned about the buffering zone between industrial and right up next to residential areas. How is that addressed?
So as we move forward, I guess there's a couple components, not necessarily part of the housing element, but since it's part of the general plan, I'll kind of go into that to some extent. So right now, I'll just step back with our general plan. We are looking at the city as a big picture, housing element being one of those components. Our next step in the process is to dive into land use. And currently, there are requirements for buffers. It's usually setbacks from the residential uses or the industrial uses from the residential uses. What we come across is many of these industrial areas have, in some cases, been there before the residential.
Yeah.
Perhaps some were rezoned over the years. But what we are doing now that we're diving into the land use plan and our team along with our consultant, it's going to do a more, I think, in-depth review if we are given the time to do that, to really take a look at some of these areas as we're looking at the zoning. The one big difference is when we started the general plan, your general plan land use map is your big picture. Your zoning map gets into the details. There was a decision made to combine the two. So because of that, we'll be going into a little more detail and certainly looking at, where we have these conflicts and are there some solutions that we can bring forward with, maybe a development code, perhaps some additional setbacks. We have to be cautious when we're going through and rezoning people's properties because there are property rights and, that has to be, considered in the equation, especially if the zoning was there before the residential occurred. But I think some of those things we'll be looking at with the land use.
When we do the review, is it the commission and the planning department, or is it people from the public get to come in on it? How is it set up?
Okay, so currently there is, the land use plan is on the website. It was done about a year ago, a draft plan. We've received comments on that plan from the community. We have some requests to look at a few areas, some that were designated in error, so we're evaluating those. So it's been out there. I believe the General Plan Advisory Committee reviewed that before. It has not come to Planning Commission yet. The next steps will be staff working with the consultant, coming up, making all the fine-tuned changes to that document. At least the land use map, bringing that back to the General Plan Advisory Committee. That committee will then review it, and then it'll go through their review process and their recommendation. And then there'll be opportunity as well for community input through that process. And as the commission, you're not going to see the land use plan until we bring you the entire general plan in its entirety. So when that document comes back to you, after we get the land use plan, that gives us the foundation to do the circulation element where we're getting into the streets. There is a component that will be evaluated. Then noise, air quality, all of the different studies can then be completed. We also have environmental justice coming up. So once the general plan document, and it's going to be like probably 3 times as big as what you have here for the housing element, and then all the technical appendices, and then the land use map, circulation map, parks map, all of that will be brought to you cohesively. And we'll probably do it over, 1 or 2, probably, I would say at least 2 meetings to give you an opportunity to, review it, digest it, and ask questions. But that would be the next process. But it does go through a lot of, still go through more public review through the General Plan Advisory Committee.
Is a traffic review part of that?
That is part of it. After the land use has been completed, the traffic study will be completed citywide.
Is any proposed landscaping involved in that, or beautification?
Generally, the beautification part, you'll have general goals and policies for the city, but not a specific plan for beautification, for certain streets. Perhaps some of the streets could have, be identified for parkways. One of the components, for San Bernardino, most of the street segments, it's already pretty much laid out. It's been laid out in many cases for over 100 years. But that would be more, I think, the community part of it. I don't know that we've actually identified that yet, but perhaps we can take a look with our grants team to see what opportunities out there to put together more of a beautification plan. But I would not expect that with the general plan right now.
Yeah, I would just add, typically, when we've done that, and it's been since before I was here, so over a decade ago, if we're to do something like that, it's maybe a specific corridor that there may be a completely separate plan designated for the general plan, because by its name is more broad brush. It wouldn't get into specific things like that. It may get into, I can say, like I'm not even sure if we would have it in there. With our downtown plan as an example, the draft that we've prepared, we do have, certain types of landscaping, a certain street tree program, things like that. We may get into some details of that sort. But as far as a specific design or how we want to beautify certain streets, those would come kind of at more your, corridor specific plans.
Well, as an example, when years ago, when Waterman was redone with the Rockway in the center of the street, and also, 2nd Street out here too, with the center dividers with the trees and so on. Yeah, I'd like to see a lot of that, or more of that.
Yeah, I know there was a lot of it that we did. This steps away a little bit from the general plan. The southern part of Waterman, a lot of the developments that were done down there then had to make certain improvements. We did work with some of the developers to improve, certain sections of those corridors, abutting some of their projects and then further out. But that was more kind of a project-specific offsite improvement. It wasn't something that was, necessarily dictated by any policy in the current general plan. And those types of things will continue. Certainly offsite landscaping is always part of projects, whether it always extends out to the medians. Sometimes it doesn't quite go that far. But again, it just depends kind of on the street and the area.
Weren't those part of their conditions of approval?
They were part of conditions,
And then
yes,
they-
for
I
for
think-
some of the items that had to go further and were requiring some amendments.
And I believe they came back to the planning commission to change some of those conditions.
You'll forgive me, I don't recall on that specifically.
Sure.
I may be mixing up a couple projects. But no, things like that, yes, they're either typically conditions or things that are negotiated, through project improvements. But not something at that kind of fine point, not something that we would ever typically include in the general plan. That's more meant to, there could be policy for like, we want to beautify our existing medians or expand that, things like that, but it wouldn't get into the fine details of how we do that.
Okay, one more question. This transportation corridor that we have down East Street, I've heard from people, and I've seen it myself, it's turned into a mess. And is that any part of any type of the redevelopment plan? The pylons going down the street are knocked over and half of them are gone. And then the waiting areas and ticket dispensing machines are a disaster. That's the most unsightly thing that we have, and that's our center transportation corridor, supposedly.
As we move forward, I think that's another conversation to have. I'm sure, there's some discussion, transportation with the entity, and I don't know the entity that's actually handling that, but we'll pause that, and we'll take some notes on that you have some concerns there, but I want to kind of shift us back to the housing element. Thank you.
I have a couple of questions. Travis, or maybe Placeworks, can you walk through me a little more the methodology for deciding which city-owned parcels, why they were selected, and what that methodology looked like?
So I can actually jump in here. So with the city actually does have quite a bit of land. And a lot of the land was acquired under the former redevelopment agency. And then as such, became, when redevelopment was disbanded, became our successor agency. So we still have, quite a few properties available. So when we're evaluating those properties, we have a very specific process we have to go to determine, how they could potentially be used, who can actually acquire those properties. And we go through a process with the state. So the state will review, we call them SLA properties, Surplus Land Act. We review those. Usually they're offered to, in many cases, are offered to other public entities, like the county could come in, hey, we like this parcel, school district, those types of entities. When none of those entities are interested, our next category is affordable housing developers. So I'm pleased to say with our last round of properties, we identified, I know we're in negotiation with 3 of the affordable housing developers. They all went through a competitive bidding process, evaluated their proposals, the capacity to complete a project, how many units would be provided, the affordability components. We're looking at those for 100%. In this case, for the housing element, because we already had those developments in place, we knew what they were looking for. They happen to be all commercial properties, so that's why they were selected to support our housing element arena numbers. We have a few properties that no one bid on, so we'll be bringing those back out. And we have another, what we call a round of properties that will be coming out here later in the year and the first of next year. Because we had not moved forward on those yet, we did not include those. So, but we do know we will have more properties to add to our housing opportunities.
Were environmental considerations part of that methodology of selecting which looks like mostly commercial was switched to residential?
On the environmental side, most of it depends on the project they're doing, they're proposing. In this case, some of the locations, I know in the city, we are looking at some mixed-use corridors. So even if it's commercial or there's other factors, the first opportunity is affordable housing. Depending on the type of development that we'll go through and depending on the new housing laws that have come down could dictate the level of environmental review or not that would take place. But when we look at the properties, there would be done, phase one's done to make sure there's no hazardous materials, things like that on the properties. Is that what you were thinking of for?
I'm just thinking about the location of some of these parcels. So
Let me jump in if I may, and I think I can start to kind of address this. So, not going parcel by parcel, but roughly half or a little over half of the city-owned sites that we're looking to rezone, pretty much all of the ones that are currently in the CG1, those are associated with one potential project that we've been working with. It's identified as the Jamboree site in the housing element on page 427. Those properties, forgive me, I have just APNs in front of me, not the addresses. They're the far west end of Foothill, north side of Foothill, kind of at the far west end of town. If you look at them, they are an old residential area. It's a block. It's about 14 lots, which is a little over half of the city-owned sites that, front both sides of a single street. You look at it, you would say this is a single-family neighborhood. It was at one point. The majority of those homes have been demolished. At some point, years and years ago, because this is near Foothill but does not abut Foothill, it was rezoned to commercial, well predating any of the current efforts we have in front of us this evening. We looked at that. We know that there's a housing developer that is interested in it. We've looked at it, said, okay, this kind of already starts to kind of step into a residential neighborhood that backs up to Foothill or backs up to the commercial properties fronting Foothill. Anybody if you took the colors off the map, would say this is meant to be residential. So that's kind of one of the big obvious ones. We didn't do anything specifically in the middle of just a complete commercial block or right in the middle of other commercial development. It was looking at sites where there was some clear tie to other residential development. I don't know if that addresses your question.
yeah, that's helpful. Mm-hmm. I just think there's a few that are abutting the 210 freeway that were a little raised some flags, but perhaps there's a justification for that.
Did you have
the dark blue 210?
Sorry, I'm trying to skip all the way back here. Bear with me a moment. Are you referencing the maps within the addendum?
Yes.
Okay.
Can I get a page number?
Page 38 in the agenda packet.
Sorry, I am trying to skip back to that here. Okay, those sites actually, this is noted as figure 4. Is that correct? Yes. Those are actually already zoned for residential. There's a number of kind of higher density multifamily. So those are not part, forgive me, I can't recall if they're city owned or not, but they already are zoned for multifamily residential. Those would be the instance where we said we're not actually changing the underlying intent of the zone. It's not going from commercial, it's simply increasing the density. And it's not something that shows up here just on this exhibit, but it's pretty much surrounded by other multifamily projects.
Then my last question is more of a process alignment question. So I understand you have to do the housing element first because we're under a tight deadline. Should something come out through the land use or environmental justice element that requires a change to the housing element, are we tied to what we approved right now for the housing element?
So, well, I'll just say, I mean, with any of the easy answer is with any of the documents that we adopt, including the overall general plan and the development code, there's inevitably going to be changes. There's going to be things, as much as I try, there's going to be something that we miss. So we're always free to come in and bring back and amend that. With the housing element specifically, yes, we've already had kind of preliminary discussions, and the idea is that at some point we will need to come back and do some minor amendments. The simplest example there is we're referencing specific zoning and specific densities. Obviously, we're doing it more focused on specific parcels here, but In terms of the entire city, we reference that. Our processes, the different types of permits for different development, a lot of that is anticipated to change in one degree or another when we adopt the new general plan and our new development code. So we would have to come back and do some updates so that our documents remain consistent with each other. But what those are right now, obviously that's to be determined through the process.
Definitely understand. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Let me see if I understand this. The general plan has recognized city-owned property and other property for the mixture of houses, single-family, apartment, condominium, auxiliary housing. So my understanding is that those areas that are already zoned for residential are going to stay fixed for residential. So that the people who
For
are...
this project, yes.
So that the people who are charged with implementing, I'm talking about implementing, we're just here designing, implementing the general plan, will be able to market those lots to developers that this is for a residential area. We're talking about housing elements, but I'm actually thinking neighborhoods, whole neighborhoods that are going to be located, the newer neighborhoods. And I also wonder, where does it state on the general plan accommodations for low-income housing?
So, we have two components that we're looking at. The general plan is going to be the big picture and our zoning, that will look at zoning citywide. With the housing element component that we're looking at, we have looked at housing opportunities, the zoning, general plan designations citywide for housing opportunities. What our goal with this plan is to identify the opportunity for building housing throughout the city, being able to meet our RENA numbers of over 8,000 units and have the capacity and provide the opportunity. We've identified specific areas where we can specific projects that we know of that would be developing 100% affordable housing, low and very low income for the three that we're looking at. But with this plan, we aren't identifying specific neighborhoods to build low-income housing. We are looking at providing the opportunity to provide that range of very low, low, moderate income and above income or above moderate, or unaffordable housing in some cases citywide. So we're looking at areas citywide that could provide those ranges of housing.
So those properties that are already zoned would be reserved for that, for the housing element?
Okay, so not all properties within the city. So anything that's zoned residential right now, so if there's a single-family neighborhood, it has single-family homes in it, we're not proposing any changes. If there's vacant land there, developers can build single-family homes there.
Okay.
If it's multifamily and it's vacant, or there's a house on there and it's multifamily, they want to remove the house, they can build multifamily units up to the densities allowed. So they can currently do that. The sites, the rezonings that we're doing right now, we have the two categories. We do have some privately owned properties. We need to provide more housing to meet the needs of our RENA numbers for the housing element. So we're upzoning their property to give them the opportunity to build more units. We're not taking anything away. We're actually adding to them. And then the properties the city owns, we are specifically designating those for the higher density housing designations. We happen to own those, so we can actually control the affordable units. So we can say, yes, we own these properties. Developer, you need to provide very low very low and low income units there. Those are the only ones we can actually control. We can't tell a developer that they have to build low income anywhere, but we can control our own properties, and that's what we're doing as a city.
Okay.
Does that answer what you're looking for? Thank you.
I don't know if it's under your purview. How can we ensure that low-income housing is for people that qualify as low income and not be taken over by an investor and raise the prices?
Excellent question. Excellent question. So as we are working with these affordable housing developers as a city, as the San Bernardino County and San Bernardino County Housing Authority, works with developers, provides funding for these projects. We provide funding. In this case, we're going to provide some land. There's affordability covenants. And generally, most all of the affordability covenants now are 55 years. So as we're selling them the land and they're coming in and developing their project, they're going to have some layering of affordability covenants. First, for us to sell the land, we're going to require, before we transfer the land, we're going to have a deed of trust and covenants of affordability recorded on the property. So they have to provide that. And then the funding sources, be it tax credits. A lot of the developers get tax credits through the state. They'll get home funding, which is through HUD, coming through the city and the county. And then there's some other funding that can be used as well. All of this funding, each funding agency that's involved requires affordability covenants be recorded on the property in order to get this money. So that's how we ensure it. And then through our programs here at the city, we have a program for monitoring those units. So we actually cycle every year a number of units. We're actually confirming that we go out, take a look, make sure those units are still being provided to those people at the income levels that project requires.
Anyone else? Okay, let's see. So do we now vote?
You'd request a motion.
Request a motion? I need a motion, please.
And the motion would include all three items. And I believe it's on the screen, if you can see that. The motion would be items 1, 2, and 3.
I would make a motion. Can I just say items 1, 2, and 3, or do I need to?
Yeah, I think that's okay.
Okay. I move.
And Travis mentioned it earlier.
Okay.
We still need a second and a roll call vote.
I need a second to the motion. Anybody want to second the motion?
I'll second
More
it.
questions? Okay. All right, and now we take the roll call.
Chair Armstead,
I approve.
Vice Chair Quill,
Aye.
Commissioner Lopez,
Yes.
Commissioner Garcia,
Yes.
Commissioner Flores,
Yes.
Commissioner Sherrick.
Yes.
Vote is unanimous. It passes.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, we don't have any more items on the agenda, I believe. This was it.
I think we have no non-public hearing items. The next item would be Planning Commission reports and announcements.
Do we have any planning commissioner announcements? Anybody? No? I would like to make a comment, if I can. I want to thank our planning department, community development, and housing for the hard work you did on this project for San Bernardino's housing element. You've done so much in 6 months. We got it done, or you got it done. We thank you. We want to appreciate the planning department for hiring new staff, which we badly needed, and maybe we can get more things done. We want to thank you for all your hard efforts. Thank you so much. The city wouldn't be going forward without your help. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. I know on behalf of the staff, we very, very much appreciate your confidence in us, Chair Armstead, and thank you to the Commission for approving or moving forward on this housing element. It has been quite a journey. I'm excited to bring this forward. We're looking forward to going to City Council. Our PlaceWorks team was instrumental. I think Mark Hoffman specifically has spent many late nights and holiday weekends helping us get to this point. HCD seems really happy with the city, so we'll continue that effort. Once we go to council, I don't want to. I'm looking for wood to knock on here because it's not done till they actually, get to see it and that it's certified. But this will open opportunities for the city to, once certified, secure other funding through the state. Because one of our requirements for certain funding is that we have a certified housing element. And so this is to commend everyone. As I mentioned at the last meeting, I'm wrapping up. I will likely be here. I'm trying to do as much as I can with the limited hours to wrap things up until our new director of the city is recruiting for that position. I believe they have someone in mind. I'm not sure the status of that yet, but I'm hopeful that that person will be on sometime mid-February. So at this point, I will plan to be here for your February 13th Planning Commission meeting to help guide that process. And I will be at the City Council meeting at this point to present items and be there for the housing element as well to help, final that process. And as Charm said, did indicate, we will have 3 new staff members joining us here in February: a planning aide, a assistant planner, and associate planner. So that will really help build the foundation. We're still recruiting for a city planner. And then, as the director comes on board, I think we might have a couple vacancies, an administrative assistant position, but we're definitely getting ready to, for the new director coming in we'll be able to have a lot more resources available to keep the department moving. So thank you all.
We want to thank you for being with us during this transition. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair Armstead, if I may, I did have a few things I wanted to mention. I won't be with you at the February 13th meeting. I have a personal conflict that evening, and so my colleague Abraham Galvan Sanchez will be covering that meeting. I also want to remind all of you that April the 2nd is your due date for your Form 700s. That's your statements of economic interest. And the last thing is I want to mention that the Planning Commissioners Academy, which is put on by the League of California Cities, is going to be held at the Hilton Long Beach from March 6th through the 8th. And I will be there, and I'll be presenting Planning Commissioners Jeopardy. So if you do attend the conference, I'd love for you to stop by. And that's it. Thank you.
Are you sending us that information so we can?
I think we could probably have maybe Jennifer
Yeah.
send it out.
We'll get that out to you.
Is that it? Then we're ready to adjourn. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.